The airport waits in a particular kind of limbo. Rows of tired chairs, the hollow echo of trolleys, announcements that float like promises and dissolve. I arrived 2 hours before her scheduled touchdown, because I always like to be early for the little moments that mattered. I had imagined standing under the arrival board, scanning faces until I saw her, hair pulled back, a smirk reserved for me only, suitcase rolling like a punctuation mark. Instead, there was a blinking line, flight delayed, maintenance, a small, bureaucratic betrayal that felt almost absurd. I texted, "No stress. Call me when you land." She replied, "Ugh. Yep. Might be late. Hate this." Her thumbs moved across the screen in the same language they'd used for years. Light, obliging, the kind of affection that kept small fissures from widening. I settled with coffee that tasted of burnt coal and watched the gate where she should appear. People came and went like fragments of other lives. Business travelers with steady gazes. Teenagers who believed in permanence. Mothers corralling children like constellations. The departure board churned, numbers shifted, times updated. At 10:18 p.m. a voice announced, "Flight 274 from Doha now landing." I stood, the chair making a small complaining noise, and walked to the viewing corridor that overlooked the arrivals walkway. Families gathered, faces pressed to glass, the kind of hope that made you look young by proxy. I leaned against a railing like a man testing a story he'd already accepted. Then I saw them. Two figures moving together through the sliding doors, umbrellas still in their hands like props from a day that had outstayed its welcome. At first my brain offered kindness. Maybe he's a colleague. Perhaps he's a friend helping with luggage. Maybe he's a fellow passenger they met while waiting out the delay. Then details assembled themselves like evidence. He was not a man she'd introduced at dinners. He had the casual claim of someone who could sit close in a way that looked deliberate. His hand, easy, familiar, rested at the small of her back. She leaned in, not the quick, platonic nod of greeting, but the sort of lean that carries a memory of hotel room laughter. They were both smiling in that private way people smile, when the world outside their bubble has been politely excused. I did not move. The air felt suddenly too thin, the fluorescent lights too bright, the tile too loud beneath their shoes. I watched her scan the crowd, eyes sweeping like a searchlight that skipped me entirely. Her smile didn't cross the distance. She walked past where I stood, an invisible guidepost, and didn't see me until he pointed her in the general direction of baggage claim. When her gaze finally touched mine, first there was a flicker of recognition, then a pause, calculation, then a face rearranged into a practiced version of relief I had seen 1,000 times on our couch at 11 p.m. after a long day. "Adam!" she called, voice pitched like an invitation. She came forward in a way that suggested she had rehearsed this introduction at least once. His handshake was firm, practiced, the kind that markets itself. Confident, assured, not too familiar. He introduced himself, Gareth. His name had the clipped consonants of someone who liked to say his syllables with a small, secure smile. "We had to wait out the storm together," he explained. "Flight got diverted. Could have been worse." His hand landed briefly on her forearm, an anchor disguised as comfort. I noticed a scent that bloomed where his jacket brushed mine. A sharp cologne that cleaved the air, different from the faint warmth of her perfume, that still lodged in the scarf she'd left on my chair. My mouth went dry. I could have spoken. I could have asked the obvious, the cruel, the graceless question. Who is he? Instead, I transacted in silence, buying time to move without spectacle. We hugged. Her hug soft and quick, his arm tagging along like an intrusion that had learned the rules. Later I learned the language of excuses. We took a cab together. We just met in Doha. He helped me with my bag. Those sentences can be stitched into plausibility, but sewn over truth. At the carousel, their suitcases came side by side, two identical black suitcases like twins labeled for convenience. As we walked from the carousel to the exit, the city lights glimmered through glass, and my hands were empty of anything useful. No proof, no receipt, no sudden memos that explained hours away. We hailed a cab, and she said, "I'm really tired. Let's go home." He offered for her to sit in front, chivalry or assumption, and she accepted, laughing at something he said. The laugh landed like a coin dropped into a fountain, bright, then swallowed. At home, she told a story of delays, of bored passengers, of an airport bar where a conversation with a man named Gareth had made the hours less heavy. She described him as friendly, a useful companion. I listened with the even breathing of someone cataloging a museum of small, suspicious things. When she fell asleep on the couch that night, face softened by exhaustion, I retrieved her phone from the coffee table, reasoning every small theft away as curiosity rather than invasion. Her messages were a neat line of normalcy, work threads, check-ins, but the call log had a recent entry, a 39-minute audio call with Gareth at 9:07 p.m., the exact sliver time when her flight had been announced as landing. I stared at the timestamp like a man reading the credentials of a spy. 39 minutes could be a business negotiation. 39 minutes could be a confession. The phone, warm in my hand, felt like a relic I had no right to own. I decided then that I owed myself something simple, the truth unadorned by melodrama. The next morning I drove to the airport under a sky that looked prepared to wash the world in pragmatic light. I requested CCTV footage it lost and found like any concerned husband checking a timeline. Policies and privacy statements hummed like bureaucracy pushing me away. But the airport security desk, perhaps moved by polite persistence or the human fatigue that recognizes private grief, agreed to review the footage in exchange for a formal statement. The grainy playback was a teacher, patient and terrible. There they were, her and Gareth, moving together to the terminal earlier than they claimed, hands closer, gestures that made domestic choreography of strangers. The video caught a moment I hadn't allowed myself to imagine. They paused near the coffee kiosk, heads inclined. He brushed her hair from her face. The camera caught it as if to punctuate a paragraph. I watched the image like someone reading the last page of a book I hadn't finished. Confrontation is an art with many forms. I could have stormed to her, demanded explanations on a return of decibels. Instead, I chose a method that cost me less dignity and yielded a truth that needed no amplification. I printed a still from the footage and placed it on the kitchen table between the leftover cereal and the mail. The photograph was modest, 2 silhouettes close beneath a sign advertising duty-free chocolate. I made some tea, poured it, and sat opposite her as she stirred sugar into her mug without looking at the paper on the table. She saw it then, of course. The color left her face like an unpaid check. She read the frozen frame, felt whatever she felt, panic, calculation, embarrassment, and then looked up at a face that had grown younger and older in the fraction of a breath. H.